And we are live. Yes, indeed. The eyeball, the perennial eye is looking at me, and the numbers are going to start jumping on any minute now. I am absolutely thrilled today, as many of you about to introduce, in my mind, the greatest hero in our times, in our day. A man who very few people in this world need no introduction, and he's certainly one of them. I'm going to begin by a quote from Mary, a friend of mine in the Himalayas, who sent a message early today, thrilled and looking forward to watching our guest on this show. And she sent the message through. It was a quote from Anton de Saint-Exupéry, who many of you may know wrote some beautiful books, a French writer. And his quote was as follows: "If you want to build a boat, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the immensity of the sea." And I think that pretty much sets the tone for our guest. I'm going to be introducing to you all in a fanfare the one and only David Icke. David, lovely to see you.
Yeah, real pleasure, Sasha.
And I'm also introducing to our audience Sean Stone. Sean, good to see you.
I don't get a poem too?
Well, I think that I was right. That poem really is relevant to all of those of us. Some of us not as wise as David, but David, honestly, just such a thrill. First thing I've got to say, we've got 1,000 people more abouts jumped online. We're going to have a lot more coming on in the minutes ahead. And as we just amp the numbers up a little, David, please, can you settle one score for me personally? Because I've had to tell about 12.5 million people in the last few years that, yes, David Icke did actually come to my house for tea many years ago. Please just qualify that point so people don't think I'm a complete liar.
I remember it, and I remember it was very posh. Oh, yes.
Oh, I'm one of them.
It was very posh, yes. In London, right? Yeah.
It was in London, and I remember we sat on the sofa for 4.5 hours, and I certainly didn't get up. And just remember a big bear hug at the end. It was just such a wonderful, wonderful time for me. And you know, the sad thing is, it was so long ago, David, we didn't have the bloody cameras on telephones, so I've had no proof to show people all these years. Anyway,
it definitely happened, and it's amazing, you know, when you look back at how long this has been going and how many experiences and places that have been involved to put together the strands in the web, the pixels in the picture, which is now unfolding before our eyes, of course.
Well, my first question for you was, how does it feel to be increasingly now drawn into the loving embrace of millions and millions of people around the world who acknowledge you for being the gold standard in wisdom keeping and light bearing? And that's not light praise. I mean, you really are the rock god of this truth and disclosure movement. But honestly, I often reflect, how does it feel for you to finally be received in the way that you knew you were walking in that Christ of light for many, many years, David, and for many of them on your own? How are you feeling about it in the 21st century?
Well, it's mixed, really. There's a good side of it, and there's a not so good side of it. And of course, not good, so good side of it is what I've been writing in my books for 30 years is happening. It's happening in people's lives. It's destroying people's lives. And, you know, the idea was to try to head this off before it got to this stage, although it had to get bad before enough people would wake up to it. So on that side, you know, it's not nice to see what's happening to people, not just, you know, in the Western world, but all over the world. But on another side, it's very, which is kind of a strange thing to say amid current events, but there's a positive side to it. Because like I said a few seconds ago, in fact, I said years ago when people said, well, how do you think this is going to go? I said, it's got to get really bad. Because while there's a get out clause, well, where's your evidence it's not happening now? And the numbers that need to cease to cooperate with their own enslavement are not going to be what they need to be. But what's happened is that this global cult, as I call it, which has been operating under the radar and moving society in the direction that it's now blatantly arrived at, it was under the radar, and therefore people had a get out clause. Well, you know, I can't see it, but now it's entered the room. It's entered the room, and we can see it, and it's been incredibly encouraging to me. I mean, when I started out 30 years ago, it was ridiculous. I would walk down the street and I'd be literally laughed at by people passing by. Going into a bar or pub or anything like that was just crazy. It was just it's ridicule. And when I started talking about where the world was being taken by this global cult, as I call it, no one wanted to know. It was a very lonely journey. But now I look at it, and it's not like that at all. And, you know, people who are relatively new to this, and I do understand it, say to me, oh, you know, it's not happening quick enough. People aren't waking up quick enough. And I say to them, you should have been with me 30 years ago. This is dreamland, mate. This is dreamland compared with then.
Yeah.
And you know, we have this this gathering number of people because of events they can't ignore, who are seeing that the world is not like they thought it was.
Yeah.
But there's the next stage. Stage number one is quite decently advanced now. Of I can see it. I tell you what, this is not right what they're telling us, is it? It's the nonsense. Why are they doing that? Why do they? That's a contradiction. What's going on?
Right.
But the next stage is the one, and that's when that awareness that we're being lied to and there's a gigantic scam going on expresses itself in non-cooperation with the scam, because it's simple numbers. At the core of this global cult, you get them in one room.
Yeah.
And yet they're manipulating, getting on now for 8 billion people. Now that is only possible because the 8 billion people have allowed that to happen. And, you know, as I've said a number of times recently, fascism is not introduced by fascists. It's not enforced by fascists. There's not enough of the fascists. Fascism is enforced by the population acquiescing to fascism. That's what allows it to happen. And that's what's, of course, what we've seen from large numbers of people since the turn of 2020.
Very good. And Sean, you've been doing a lot of nodding there. Any questions you want to jump in there with before I take over the reins again?
Yeah, no, just to reiterate a few things. David, I've really, I've been a fan of your work since you were my gateway drug back in the 90s. I think it was 99, 2000 even, actually even earlier, that I saw your first book on my dad's shelf. And he would not dare to read it, I'm sure. But it was sort of an eye-opener for me when I read The Biggest Secret. And, as you say, you've been doing this for 30 years, Sasha. Around the same time, I got onto this really in the late 2000s, 2010, 12 time period. And then, carrying that forth. And like you said, we're watching this unfold, these theories, these conspiracies, this agenda, we're watching this unfold before our very eyes. And all of a sudden we're realizing we are in that position of being able to lead because people are looking for insight and advice. What the heck is happening, right? I mean, people are turning around left and right going, I was a liberal yesterday, and now the liberals are all turning on each other, and they're basically betraying each other, turning each other in for not wearing masks, and they're sort of like, they're horrible human beings, and they're, enforcers, they're fascists. I want to be with but I think what it's allowing us to do, as you say, it's like people have to see the boot in their face before they believe it. And what allows them to do is start to ally themselves with those of a similar make, right? Those of quality of character, of orientation, of understanding that this is not the reality that we wish to interface with. And I'm just curious, because I know Sasha's working with an intent to ultimately create an intentional community and sort of land-based society. How do you see moving out of this New World Order matrix, right, and being able to create our own society, our own way of relating and being in this world without having to be beholden to that mammon god, let's say?
Well, there's a number of directions we could go with that. But if people look at my books over the years, I've gone into the names, dates, places, connections, organizations, secret networks. But in the books also is always the nature of reality and the nature of the true I. And that's not by coincidence. It's because if you ignore one, then you're in a situation of imbalance. I see over the years, I've seen the, if you like, the spiritual movement, that a lot of it has been very adverse to the fact that there's a bricks and mortar names, dates, places conspiracy going on. And they've been in denial of it. And I don't think that we come into this world to then ignore the fact that we've done so. We need to face what's going on if we're going to change it. Yeah. But then on the other side, if you're only focusing on the, if you like, the 5 sense level of the manipulation that I'm talking about, then there really are no big answers. So you fall for, if you only see the 5 sense level of everything, you only see 5 sense answers to what appear to be 5 sense problems. So you'll go down the road, for instance, of we must stockpile weapons to fight the enemy, which of course the enemy loves because it's got all the state-of-the-art weaponry at its fingertips. So if you, my experience when I look at the world is if you look for 5 sense answers to 5 sense problems, what you're going to create is more 5 sense problems in a cause and effect going on and on and on. So the understanding of the nature of the true I and the nature of reality and how we interact with it, how it affects us, how we can affect it, for me is the gateway to the way out of here. Because when you break it down, our perceptions become our experience. And you have this sequence where you control information, and by controlling information, you're dictating perception. That's why all the censorship's going on now, of course. And from perception comes behavior. People behave because of their perceptions. And so what we are looking at, and we can go deeper into this, a much more deep, energetic level, but even on the surface level, what we call human society is simply a collective projection of human perception. Now, if you look at 2020, it's a classic. There were 3 and continue to be 3 very distinct perceptions which have led to experience. One, right at the start of this, in the spring of last year, there was the perception that there was a deadly virus.
Yep.
And that perception led to fear of the deadly virus. And that fear perception led to vast numbers of people going under house arrest meekly and obediently because their perception was there was a deadly virus. There's a classic example of how perception becomes behavior, becomes consequence. The next group, which was very much smaller, but is bigger now, were those that looked at it and thought, this don't make sense to me. There's something going on more than this. But their fear of the consequences of not obeying led them to also meekly, if not perceptually, but meekly obey and go under house arrest. Then there was the third group, which at the start of 2020 was very small. It's not now by comparison. And that's those that saw that there was a scam going on here. We were being lied to and made the decision, I'm not cooperating with it.
Yeah.
And it's the third group that has to enormously increase to bring an end to this. So the thing is, to come round to completing the answer to the question, is that if we change our perception, we change the projection of that perception, which we call human society. And because people are in fear, because people are kept in ignorance of their true and infinite nature, because we have a vast swathe of humanity that perceives itself as in terms of little me, you have a dynamic that comes from that in which the few are dictating to all the vast numbers of people that think they're little me and I have no power. You start to change your self-identity. For me, fellas, this is the key: changing self-identity. What happens is, from the moment we are born, we are constantly encouraged and pressured to self-identify with labels. With I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm this sexuality, I'm this race, I'm this religious faith, I'm this income bracket. Labels, labels, labels. And if you look at what's happened in recent years, as that string of letters, LBGT, and on and on and on it goes now, has got bigger and bigger and bigger, what that is actually an expression of is the constant subdividing of perceived identity labels. And so you go from man, woman, this, that, and you go into smaller and smaller subdivisions of it. And people feel the need to self-identify by projecting the minutiae of how they see themselves. And the point being, I would suggest, is that list of letters and these labels, they're not who we are. They are what we are experiencing.
Right.
And we've been manipulated to self-identify the true I, which is consciousness, awareness, a state of awareness, being aware, to self-identify that I with labels. This is what identity politics is all about. This is why the elite, the cult, brought it all in. And the more you self-identify with the minutiae of your, if you like, human experience, which you identify as you, the more you are pulling out through your focus of attention on the labels, you are withdrawing from the influence of the greater self. And the greater self coming through the heart and expanded awareness, which is not some guy sitting on a mountain cross-legged, I'm the guru. Anybody can do it. It's a choice. It's our natural state. Never mind, anyone can do it. And when we start to expand our self-identity from I am my labels to I am all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience called those labels, then our perceptions change, our emotional state changes, yes. Our energetic field changes, and as that gathers and becomes greater and greater a collective transformation, that expansion and transformation of the sense of the I becomes a transformation of perception, collectively becomes a transformation of human society. So it's not like, well, okay, we're gonna build a new society, so we need an organization, okay, yeah, we need someone to take the minutes. Who's going to take the minutes? Who's going to be secretary? Now that sort of stuff plays out on one level, but it's not what changes society. What changes society is what society is, which is the collective perceptions of humanity.
But David, what if I do identify with being a black, lesbian, obese midget? You know, that's how I feel. I'm feeling that within myself. Or I'm a middle-aged man with a wig who wants to go and hang out in girls' toilets.
Sasha, everyone.
Don't hurt my feelings, David. Don't hurt my feelings.
Sasha, everyone identifies as a doctor these days. They're all wearing masks.
Or bandits.
Yes, bandits.
I see a lot of surgeons walking around
with a mask on. Once you got arrested, now you get arrested if you don't. It's crazy, man.
David, just starting at the alpha point here. I mean, I love all of your kind of psychology / spiritual philosophy, because that's the stuff that's really emboldening people's own disidentification with false light and re-identification with that quantum cosmic beingness, and that's essential now that we do break down all of this kind of cult programming. But we are still suffering civilizationally, collectively, and individually, invariably, from trauma. Trauma seems to be the source code of Alpha Omega. So looking at archons, are the archons the same thing as the egregore, number one? And how would you describe the archon, and what is its function? Where does it stem from, and how do we deal with it?
Well, I mean, this is a massive part of the picture, and again, there's many directions we could go. I'll give you an overall view. When I started on this journey in 1990, well, consciously, I realize now my whole life has been this journey. It's just that I became conscious of it after 1990. It started out where, with incredible synchronicity, information, experience, people would come into my life that were providing information, little pieces in the puzzle, like putting a jigsaw together. And it started out in the 5 sense world. It was about names, dates, places, as I've said, connections, family bloodlines, and what have you. And then as it moved on, it went. The information coming to me got deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole. And I realized anyway, pretty quickly, that I was looking at an intergenerational conspiracy to move further and further down the road through what we call history to a total 24/7 artificial intelligence controlled human race. And these people coming in and out of these secret society networks, what I call the global cults, I say, were coming in, they were making their contribution, and they were going out, and then others would come in, and the next generation would carry on in the same direction. And it was obvious that there had to be some common force that was providing the overview of that manipulation outside the human world. That became very clear to me. And then I started to realize, as I traveled around the world and I talked to shamans and carriers of ancient knowledge in the various cultures, that although they use different names, obviously they would in the different cultures, there was a common theme about a force which was not human and operated overwhelmingly in the unseen, and almost the entirety of forever is unseen to humans. I mean, we operate on a visual frequency band that's so tiny, it's laughable, what we call visible light. So what we can see is just almost a joke in terms of the infinity beyond it. So it started to the information started to move in that direction. I started to come across lots of people who were talking and giving the information, and I would have personal experiences related to this other force. And one of the names you mentioned there, that one cultural belief system group called the Gnostics had for this non-human force manipulating human society, was archons. comes from a Greek word meaning rulers, appropriately. And they buried some treasure trove of texts. It's estimated around 400 AD in an earthen jar, which was found in 1945, a place called Nagamadi, about 75, 80 miles north of Luxor in Egypt. And about a fifth of these writings were about the archons and the manipulation of human society. And now it was quite late in my uncovering of this other force that I came across them. I've got all the books and the text over to me left now. And that was good, because I'd come to conclusions about this force and how it worked up to that point. And then I read these texts, and it was just a mirror of the conclusions that I'd come to. And that is this. And these Nagamadi texts talk about the fact that this archontic force does take form. Interestingly, it talks about reptilian form and a form that pretty much describes what we call the Greys.
Yeah.
But in its base form, it is simply consciousness energy. And this is the way I see it. We talk about these forms and these different names that different cultures have, but its basic form is a very distorted, chaotic, inverted state of consciousness, state of awareness. And that word inverted is very, 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 very important, because its inversion, I mean, what is evil? It's the word live written backwards for a start.
Yep.
But evil is an inversion of life. It's an inversion of balance. And when you look at how this archontic consciousness plays out, because it plays out through this cult and its operatives, the whole cult structure of human society is based on inversion. And so this is why Satanists invert the pentagram.
Yes.
This is why they invert the cross. This is why their symbolism is based on inversion, because the whole thing is about inverting. And so if you look at what we just talked about, the labels as opposed to the true I, which is consciousness, that's an inversion.
Right.
The true I is perceived to be the labels, when the true I is actually the consciousness having the experience called the labels. Everything is inverted. Everything's upside down. And it is, I would suggest, because that's the nature of this consciousness. It's upside down. It's inverted. And so this is what I've been saying to people over these decades. Don't judge what this network, this cult, would do on the basis of what you would do.
Right.
You're not the same state of awareness. And one of the things, fellas, that comes out of this inversion is an inversion that leads to something called psychopathy. What is psychopathy? It is an inversion of love and harmony and compassion and empathy. If you look at what's called the Hare test, after the man who invented it, for psychopathy, and the list of traits, they say if you have enough, then you are officially a psychopath, then the top two are the lack of empathy and lack of compassion. And that's part of this inversion. See, what allows this cult to do what it does, what allows Gates to do what he's done in the last year, for instance, is there is no emotional consequence for whatever they do.
Right.
Empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of human behavior, in my view. If you can put yourself in the feelings of those you affect, that is a big resistor of your behavior. But if you don't have those consequences emotionally, because you don't have the ability to feel empathy, then anything goes. I mean, what level of empathy deletion does it need for this cult to play out in the last year a vast pandemic hoax that they wanted the outcome of destroying human livelihoods, human peace, human prosperity, the human psyche, human emotion, human hope, all of it, just to get more and more power over them and to get inside them a fake, not vaccine, an alleged vaccine, which it's a synthetic manipulation of DNA, for which there's another big story to tell about why they're doing that. But imagine the lack of empathy it takes for someone like Gates and Fauci and all these people to sit there and orchestrate this, to look at the human mayhem, debris, and catastrophe unfolding and have no emotional consequence for it. That is the archontic consciousness. And that's what's been driving this all the way through human history to present day.
And the curious thing, David, is, as you'll know, is that when running scalar frequency diagnostics against these creatures, they're living out their purpose. They're in 100% alignment with divine purpose and personal purpose. Invariably, the Faucis, the Gates, the Hillary Clintons, these sociopathic proxies of the draconian constellation. Isn't that a curiosity?
Well, I see that slightly different, you see. When people talk about fulfilling their divine purpose, well, maybe it's fulfilling a purpose, because there are people that enter this reality, consciousness that enters this reality, to try to make a positive difference to the manipulated, systematically imposed ignorance, which is what this whole conspiracy is based on, keeping the public in ignorance of everything. And there are those that come in with the goal of maintaining that ignorance,
yes,
and manipulating that ignorance. Now, they're both fulfilling a life purpose, but I'm not sure they both necessarily can be called divine. Although if you take the picture to the next level, because everything's multi-level, you see it here and it looks a certain way, you see it here and it looks another way. So
yes,
if you take the bigger picture, well, I have this saying I've been using in the books over the years: life tends to give you your greatest gifts brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. Because I look at my life, and the most extreme challenges and situations I've faced have given me the most. I can open my mouth now and say exactly what I think, and I have no thought of what people will say about me because I say them, because I went through historic levels of ridicule 30 years ago, and broke through that concern with what other people thought of me.
Yep.
So in the experiencing of that, it was a challenge. When you're walking down the street and people are passing you, you live your life to distant and less than distant laughter. But then you see what it gives you, the gift that it gave you. And I would, if I had my life again, I would do the same because of what it gave me. So this situation, you see, that we're facing now, it's a danger, but it's also a gift. We talked earlier. How many people are awake now to how the world is being manipulated? Before? So these different levels, they have a different perspective. And one of the great things, one of the great breakthroughs, I think, is to encompass the paradox.
Yeah,
because they're not paradoxes. Something horrible happening to you, but it being a gift. They're not paradoxes, actually. They are different expressions of the same experience. You don't like having it, what it's given you.
Right.
So, the world is so not like that we're told it is, and we're told it's not like it really is, because that's the way to control.
Yeah.
Very good, Sean.
There's a lot.
We have about
Yeah,
6,000 people in our cozy little theatre with us. But Sean,
Amazing.
Please, over to you.
I hope they've got masks on.
Ah,
They should have masks in front of that computer. Absolutely.
Very
Arrest
good.
them.
So just to unpack, because there's a lot here. I love how you talk about the inversions. It's something that's come up to me very clearly, increasingly from the media. People now, I mean, up to the place where they're saying, well, you know, we're going to do anal swabs instead of mouth swabs. It's such an everything is such an inversion. Right? What the media tells you, it's like in the last few years, it's just gone to the absurd point, right? I mean, Trump said sun is good for you, vitamin D is good for coronavirus, you should get the sun. The media turned around and shadow banned sun. He said the sun is not good for you. I mean, it's a complete inversion of life, and this gets
it's a whole inversion. And what is the media, Sean? It's an inversion. The media, journalism should be revealing the truth to the people, but what it does is promote the lie. The media itself is an inversion.
Precisely. But so what's curious to me is talking about the archonic control structure and the initiation process up the ladder, because you talk about the Fauci and the Gates. And is it a process of losing one's soul? Because intuitively, I feel like it's beings, you know, everyone talks about Hillary being a blood drinker now. Well, you know, was she born a Draco, or entity attachments that occur through the course of one's life, compromising one's soul in a quest for power? I mean, what is your investigation into these type of things? How does this actually go? I mean, I do believe, yes, like you said, some families are more alien in their origin, in their bloodline, but there are those that are the servants, that are the public servants, or the, you know, the lawyers, the sophist media, the politicians that kind of sell their souls through the course of their life. How do you see the initiation process?
Well, I think all of the above. I think the major players, the intergenerational families, are born. They come into this world specifically with that inverted consciousness, and they play out that in human reality. But as you go down the pyramid, the hierarchy, you are then going to have situations where people are targeted on the basis of whether they seem suitable candidates to be absorbed into this. I've seen former Satanists talk about the fact that these smaller levels of Satanism, I mean, there was, Anton LaVey's operation, etc., that they were in a sense, a trawling operation. They were looking for candidates, and those that had no capacity for empathy were the ones that then went up the hierarchy. And so there's many different levels of it, but the key is attaching to these major players that have a very crucial role to play in advancing this agenda. It's attaching that archontic consciousness to them, so it becomes them, and basically they become vehicles. You talk about selling your soul. We are connected to our greater self by vibration, by frequency, and our perceptions are expressed as certain frequencies. Every thought is a different frequency. Every emotion is a different frequency. And if you've got a high frequency, we'll call it soul level of yourself, and you can be pulled at this experiential level into a low frequency state, or in terms of the archontic consciousness, into an incredibly distorted state. Those two states of vibration frequency are not going to talk to each other. Right. They're not. And so you can be isolated, not so much that you have no soul, but you have no connection to that higher level we call soul. And so your mission control is not your higher consciousness, it's this archontic force. And it is driving your perceptions, it's driving your lack of emotion, it's driving your psychopathy. Because, the psychopaths are not just the inner core. The psychopaths come right down the hierarchy. That's why they're able to do what they do, because they don't have emotional consequence. And so the idea is to lock these players in to these different low levels of awareness. Now, this is one of the major reasons that they draw their candidates in, the people that they thought, well, you know, they might do a job. They pull them into this via the various rituals they go through. Whether you're talking about the rituals of the Skull and Bone Society, etc., where what do they do in the Skull and Bone Society right next to Yale University? They're looking for student candidates, and then the very chosen few are invited into join the Skull and Bone Society, like the Bushes, etc. Some of it's family orientated, like with the Bushes, but there's also others that are okay. Well, they look like they could do a job. And they go through these rituals, and the idea of the rituals is to lock this connection in with this archontic force. So suddenly they start becoming an expression of it. And I talked to so many people, families, wives, etc., of those that have gone into this secret society network. And again and again, you hear the same story. He weren't like that before. His whole personality's changed. Well, because there's a new mission control. And let me just take this a little bit further, because I think it's very relevant to where this is supposed to go. Like I say, in its base form, this archontic force that's behind all this is consciousness, it's awareness, it's energy. And this whole move that's happening now, and people like Ray Kurzweil at Google are openly talking about it, to connect the human brain body to artificial intelligence, has massive, massive implications. Because I hear people talking about AI all the time, but I don't hear the question, what is AI? Now, on one level, AI is algorithms. On another level, AI is being fed all the stuff that people post on the internet, you know, and your Facebooks and your Twitters and all the rest. And people say about privacy has been lost, and there's all the surveillance going on, and there is, but there's another level of this. All that information is being fed into AI. And AI is learning, minute by minute, more and more and more about the human psyche, how it works, how it can be manipulated, and how it can be controlled. So there's that level of AI, learning AI. But I say there's another level in this whole conspiracy to enslave humanity. And you can describe it another way: assimilate human consciousness into this archontic force. And that is the level of what is will be called AI, which is actually this archontic consciousness. And through these various technological connections in the so-called smart grid, connections to the human brain mind, it's a vehicle, it's a conduit for this archontic consciousness to take over and assimilate the human mind. So when you listen to what Kurzweil said openly, because the reason they're telling you now is they really can't avoid it, because they're coming to the point where they're going to do it. So they have to go from hiding it to selling it. And so Kurzweil is saying, you get connected to AI, you'll be like gods, you'll be superhuman. The idea, of course, is to make us subhuman and post-human. But what he says quite openly is that once this connection is made, and he's talking about it really getting underway by 2030, that human thinking will be less and less part of the human psyche, and AI will do more and more of, quote, human thinking, until, and these are his words, human thinking as we know it will be basically negligible. Now that is a situation where AI has assimilated human consciousness. And the idea is that this AI, with a central controlling force, does that to every human being And therefore, humans become a hive mind,
Yeah.
whereby their perceptions no longer have to be manipulated by control of information. Their perceptions are coming direct through AI. And what I say is that that level of AI is this archontic consciousness, and it's being manipulated to infiltrate completely the human psyche and basically to become the human psyche with full assimilation. It's a massive story, yes, but without understanding this manipulative force and the fact that in its base form it is energy, consciousness, awareness, we really can't understand the full magnitude of why this smart grid AI connection to human brains is being done. But I would strongly suggest that that's where it's leading.
So, David, what's beneath Antarctica in your view, in your very well researched view, talking about invisible masters and grids and so on, the deep underground military bases, but principally Antarctica? What's your takeaway on that?
Well, I think if I talk about the underground bases and the hidden places in general, I think there are, and I think I actually live on one place called the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. There are certain places where the energetic frequency difference between this and other realities are much thinner, and there's a lot more can cross over. In these places of ritual where they do their rituals, these rituals over a period of time are thinning out that difference between the different realities so that there can be a crossover. Talk to many people who've taken part in these major satanic rituals around the world that talk about entities coming into the ritual via these gateways, which these rituals create. And I think that around the world, there are many of these places. I think Antarctica may well be one of them. But this whole theme of underground bases, etc., takes me on to what I've just talked about, because we are seeing this technology playing out. And there's virtually certainly now, no situation where you've got people sitting round a table, strumming their fingers, waiting for the next level of technology to be invented to take this forward. It's just rolling out so fast. And the reason for that is that it's been there a very long time. In fact, I say that the technology that we're now seeing was known about by this archontic force when humans were knocking rocks together.
Yeah.
If that's the story of history. And what's been happening is that humans have been developed, like just brought along like cattle, to develop intellectually, so that at least a good number of people have the intellectual capability of building their own prison, but they've not been developed spiritually to the point where they have the wisdom and the insight, although it's changing, to see that they're building their own prison. So if you were given smartphones and computers to Stone Age man, wasted time, what are they going to do with them? So you bring them along, you develop them intellectually to the point where they can work with that technology. And then you play it out, because when they were knocking rocks together, you had it. You just had to develop human awareness, consciousness, to be able to use it and to interact with it, etc. So what these underground bases are, the major ones, and I've talked to lots of people that have worked at some level in these underground bases, and the more you go down, the higher security clearance you need, and they go down a long, long way. And this is a point where there is, out of public sight an interaction between this archontic force, which in this expression can take the form of reptilian entities, gray entities, etc., etc. And there is this technological transfer. And so all this stuff that's playing out as if it's, coming out of nowhere is actually coming out of the underground bases. And that's why it's happening so fast. And what they do to cover this is they have to invent cover stories. I watched a BBC documentary about Silicon Valley. It wasn't very good because it was the BBC, but there was a very interesting part of it where they showed a sequence of garage doors in Silicon Valley. And as each door came up, they were telling you what had been invented behind that door. And I imagined someone watching this from the elite saying, guys, too many garage doors. They're going to suss it, change the cover story. And they have cover people to cover the fact that where this stuff's coming from. And these cover people become very famous. They become very rich. And part of their deal in becoming very rich is that great chunks of that wealth generated in this way has to be spent on advancing the agenda. And thus they set up foundations to use that wealth to fund the agenda. So, the idea, for instance, that Mark Zuckerberg is running Facebook, it's ridiculous. I mean, you see him on Capitol Hill, like he's caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. He's not running Facebook. No. And Jack Dorsey's running Twitter. Have you seen him? Of course not. But they're cover stories to hide the fact that this cult is running it all. And it's playing this technology out to build this grid, which is why you don't see any gaps in its unfolding.
Very good. Just a welcome to our 6,500+ visitors who are watching this. Sean, the next question for the maestro is yours. But before we go to that question,
sure,
David, I have to just let you know that I don't know how many thousand people are sending messages. We love David. That's boring, folks. We all love David. We want questions for David. Oh, and somebody says they can see your house from where they live, David. I just hope they don't have a telescopic thingy on their thingy.
All right. Well, you can see my house, but I only have a little flat in the house. I live a very simple life, and I love it. I've lived here since 2001, and it's great. I live my life in a cupboard.
Sean, question's yours.
Just going forth, because David, it sounds like, you talk about the cults that controls the reality, and there's a lot of truth to the cohesiveness of it. But I guess I kind of want to play upon the different perspectives here, because I know Sasha and I have been more hopeful and inspired in the last few years, seeing Trump coming into office in America, and maybe, your perspective is a little bit different. But how do you see someone like Trump, who is sort of a chaos agent, who has sort of been a harbinger of the Great Awakening and the process of people realizing that this thing is a rigged game, and sort of, how can someone like him come in to the fold, right, if everything is so controlled at that level?
Well, because I think there's another way of looking at it. I said in 2016, when Trump was coming through the presidential campaign, that he was going to be brought in to divide America, and something else that I'm going to come to. Now, that's not to say necessarily that Trump knew that. The question I have is, how much did he know and how much did he not know? But there was a guy called Saul Alinsky, who was a ultra-Zionist Marxist operating out of Chicago. Among his followers and advocates are Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. And he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals, in which it was a guidebook on how to transform a democratic society into a Marxist one. And I gone into detail in my books. Karl Marx, man of the people, he was the banker's boy. And, you know, it's very, very important that we stay streetwise and never see things in black and white, because it never is. It's always a shade of gray. The trick is finding the shade of gray. And so Alinsky said in this book, Rules for Radicals, one of the things he said is, when you are seeking to do this transformation, don't target faceless bureaucracies and faceless corporations. Basically, you know, your shot's too wide. Pick one person and focus all hatred and all blame and all bad things upon that person. Because as the Nazis said, keep your propaganda simple and more will believe it. So Trump's been brought in, and see, he represents something. Never mind if he's genuine or he's not. Either way, he represents something, and he's been brought through to represent something. And it's what I call pushbackers. What has been happening now for several generations, and it's all part of this Marxist creed that was promoted by Alinsky, is that the left in politics that I grew up in has been hijacked. I think you mentioned it a bit earlier. It's been hijacked. When I grew up on a council estate in Leicester in the 1950s and 60s, we were what would be called a left household, but it was that genuine left that opposed corporations, the use of wealth to suppress and control, and crucially, the assault on freedom of speech. The left, when I grew up with it, stood for freedom of speech, and it stood against tyranny. What's happened, it's been systematic, and this does relate to Trump, I will come around to it, in these recent generations, is that the school system and the education system in general, call education, a programming system, has been focused on transforming the mentality of vast numbers of young people, which now are reaching the age like Ocasio-Cortez, where they're becoming politicians. And it's called the woke mentality. And the woke mentality, wait for this, is an inversion of what was the genuine left, because it no longer stands for defending free speech, freedom of lifestyle, freedom of opinion. It stands for an inversion of that. It's been taken over. I would use this term, it's an archontic manifestation. And because it's an archontic manifestation, that's why the people that are funding these woke organizations, including BLM, are billionaires and billionaire corporations that are expressions of this archontic cult. And so you have this irony, and identity politics has brought this about, where the old genuine left would oppose the billionaires and their abuse of people, well, millionaires they were when I was a kid, and now they're in bed with billionaires. This woke fake left. The billionaires are funding them. Now, how has that come about? Because when I was growing up, the genuine left, it looked at a situation of privilege and of what was called class. It was an income bracket, and that was what the if you like, the divisions and the thing was all about. But now that's been overtaken by identity politics, because now the focus of the fake left is not challenging wealth and power and abuse of both as the old left did. It's about identity politics. So if these billionaire manipulators talk the language of woke and fund the organizations pushing this woke agenda, then they're our mates. And so suddenly you have this bizarre alliance between people that call themselves social justice warriors and these multi-billionaires and billionaire corporations, including George Soros, who actually said publicly, I don't concern myself with the social consequences of what I do. I'm just there to make money. What is he funding these people for then? Because what they've got is a whole mentality brought through recent generations, which is pushing everything in the cult agenda. They are warriors for the cult agenda. They want, for instance, the Green New Deal, which is not about protecting the environment. It's about centralization of power over the fine detail of people's lives. They're the ones that were supporting staying in the European Union. For Britain, a European Union, which is a cult-created and controlled, bureaucratic, centrally structured dictatorship. And you have another expression of this, and you mentioned it earlier, is that this same mentality is the one that's basically demonizing anyone that's pushing back on lockdown and wearing masks and the tyranny that's unfolding here. So they've created this mentality, which is in every area, pushing what the cult wants society to be. And it was very clear that at some point, and we have it now, they were going to manipulate into power a full-blown woke government. Biden, I would say Biden's running it. Of course, he's not, but he's a front man for it. And that's what we have now. And we're seeing the consequences of that in the first few weeks. Now, these pushbackers who are pushing back against this, they don't want this stuff. They don't want this, what this woke agenda, i.e. the cult wants. And so what they've done is they've gathered them around Trump. And so my question is always not what are people saying, what actually is the outcome of what they do or the situation they're involved in. And it's no accident whatsoever that in the run-up to this bringing in of this, I say this is, and we're seeing evidence of it already, this is going to be the most extreme American regime in American history, the Biden one. It's going to be mind-blowing in what it's going to seek to impose. But just before they do it, we have this situation on Capitol Hill, which has given them all the excuses that they wanted to come in days later and go big time for that group. They're called Trump supporters, but actually what they are is pushbackers. And people who are pushbackers and don't support Trump, they're also being included in this insurrection, white privilege kind of nonsense to demonize them. And so if you look at the outcome of the 4 years of Trump, it's a situation where you have massive polarity in American society, and they want full-blown civil war. And at the same time, they've isolated the pushbackers, and all guns are now pointing at them. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that was planned from the start. And I would just say this: whatever people say about Trump, we have got to get out of the save me complex. We've got to stop saying, save me God, save me Donald, save me this, save me that, save me the other. We are that which we, quote, want to save us. For reasons I talked about, our perceptions become our experience becomes human society. And the more that we are looking to other people, be they an organization, a political party, or a single human being, to do it for us, and because that's the easiest way. People think, oh, they'll do it for me. That's great. The more we are not using the power we have and the power that is necessary to be expressed, that is going to turn this around, because we're giving it away. And, you know, if you give your power away to a religion, or you give it away to whatever, it's no different to giving it away to Donald Trump or giving it away to QAnon. They're all points where you're giving your power away. They're going to do it for me. Yeah. We have to do it. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. The answer is staring us in the face.
Very good. Yeah. Very good. Sean, stay with us there. I just want to get on to a section of our show, which is going to be the yes, no, maybe so rapid fire questions, David, because we have to get through 3,500 questions the next few minutes. Okay. So, yes, no, maybe so. Blue Avians and the Sphere Alliance.
I don't get that one.
Oh, Blue Avians? You've not heard of the Blue Avians?
No, not really.
The blue bird creatures, the budgie creatures that are all blue, and they've got the Sphere Alliance that...
All right.
No. Yes, no, maybe so.
Hence Twitter. Well, the point is about everything is that we live within this tiny band of frequency, of visible frequency, which I said before. Look at the diversity of form and expression of life within that tiny band of frequency, and then think the potential for various forms and expressions of consciousness and life in the greater picture. And I think that one of the things that makes people reflex action kind of wave away as crazy is because one of the greatest forms of mind control is to limit the sense of the possible. You limit the sense of the possible, you're going to dismiss things that are actually happening because you don't think they're possible. So anything's possible. Any form of life is possible. And so
okay, well, I'm gonna let that one slide. This is a yes, no, or maybe so, David. You have to behave yourself, okay?
Okay.
Yes, no, maybe so. That's it. The Galactic Federation. Yes, no, maybe so.
Maybe so, but I think it's consciousness that this was really all about, and not anything in the land of form.
Okay, on Earth medicine, and we all know that you've had an epiphany with Earth medicine, but is taking ayahuasca today in 2021 the same thing as taking it 20 or 30 years ago?
I don't know. But I know that my experience gave me the chance to see reality from another perspective, and it was incredibly enlightening.
Okay. Would you leave your children alone with Joseph Biden? No, that's a joke. Is Joseph Biden a cyborg? And that's not a joke.
Well, I mean, it's very difficult. Yes, no, maybe so. I have written in the books, and I do believe this, that a lot of these people, I look at Bill Gates, Sasha, and I see a cyborg. I look at someone like Mark Zuckerberg, and I see a cyborg.
Absolutely.
Because we've got to appreciate that we're not talking about people or cyborgs on the level of technology that we're aware of now. This is massively advanced.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I do think the inner core of these bloodlines are cyborgs, absolutely.
Okay. Should we revisit our ideas of who Hitler and Stalin were, for example, as historical figures, or are we to continue believing Fabianists and Tavistockian agendas?
Well, I mean, if you look at all these different people that fronted up tyranny, in the end, they're all serving the cult, in my view, because if you look at what's happening in the world from the start of 2020, it's a global version of Nazi Germany, or a global version of Stalinism, and we have the blueprint for how the world is supposed to be in China. I mean, the cult was behind the Mao Revolution. Why? Well, one of the key reasons was that the plan was to use that closed society, as it was for a long time, to incubate the global system of control, not least using technology, which they always planned to play out across the entire world. And since the pandemic hoax was played, the world, the Western world, has become more and more like China, and that's all fits this old process.
Right. Very good. That ends our rapid fire questions. But someone's asking here, gematria. Does that have anything to do with what we're living through right now? What's your take on gematria and the status quo?
Well, you know, in the end, we come out with all these words and all these concepts, but I do keep coming back to try to keep it simple. That we live in the world we do because the human perception is of a certain state that manifests that world, and we change human perception and the world changes. It has to, because one's a projection of the other. So, you know, I don't go into these, these names and concepts like that. I like to keep it real simple. But the whole foundation of the conspiracy is the control of human perception, because this cult knows that if it controls human perception, it dictates human society.
Right.
And therefore, the answer is to take back control of our perceptions and therefore manifest a different society. It's real simple, the way we got caught and the way we get out of here.
Sean, question's yours.
Well, let's go a little deeper into what's coming and how, you know, we're organizing. I mean, I see, just to follow up on where we left it with the Trump thing. I didn't see it as a savior quality, although I guess some people I think there was more of a derision that was heaped on those that supported Trump, was the idea that he's messianic, because there was a biblical quality, I think people feel, especially there's a large Christian community globally, right, that is waiting for this redemption, waiting for this Christ figure to emerge. And so I don't necessarily believe that that's going to come in one figure. I do believe in Christ consciousness, and I think that we are approaching, or we are there actually, and it's available to us. So to me, it's really a question of organizing. And when you have someone like Trump that came through and actually showed those of us that were, as you say, we were the dissidents, we were the ones that were pushing back against this New World Order ideology, and realizing, wait a minute, there's millions and millions and millions of other patriots like us, right? Within government, within our government, within British government, within other countries, also supporting what the Trump movement stood for, which was saying, going back to nationalism. And not as it's been, again, derided, nationalism is in the woke culture, nationalism is Nazism. But in historical version of nationalism was epitomized by America, saying we the people, by our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, empower the government, which is unique in world history, right? And I know that, yes, there's all kinds of issues with the Masonic structuring of America and its destiny, but at least there's a conception here that people are starting to get back to, which is this idea of the people empowering the government, the people having sovereignty, right? Coming together, organizing. So I guess I want to follow up more on that. I got this helicopter here, but more on how essentially this movement is, in a way, re-inviting people to take power and organize and see each other, you know, as the millions that we are, and either if we can't go into if we can't organize around nation states, maybe it's independent societies, maybe it's subcultures within countries and across borders. But yeah, essentially this has been a nice reprieve through this last 4 years, actually getting back to, you could say, away from business as usual, which now Biden, of course, as you said, is going to push the most extreme version of New World Order agenda. But now that people have reignited their realization of, hey, we actually are not being steamrolled by the New World Order. There actually has been a reprieve. There are millions of others like us, and we are the majority, not the minority. I think the awakening is very real. And so I'd love, your take on what's coming here.
Well, I think the awakening is very real, for reasons I talked about earlier. I mean, when I look back, a few decades, I mean, what's happening now is extraordinary. But I think it's we're at a point where it can go one way or it can go the other. And what this cult is always doing is trying to take a genuine movement and take it away, divert it away from actually powerfully manifesting where it wants to go. And this is why you get agent provocateurs. I mean, they were agent provocateurs and etc. involved in the momentum of going into the Capitol building, for instance, because that played into the hands of the cult. And so we are at a point where does it go? And, you know, I do think that while we can respect individuals and applaud them for what they do, we've got to stop giving power to them, and in the sense of giving it away from ourselves. And there's other ways of doing this. For instance, 75 million people voted for Trump. Okay, now how can they express what they want? They can wait for Trump to do it. They can wait for QAnon to do it, etc. They can have a protest, or 75 million people can say, we are not cooperating with our own enslavement. And people can get together and organize together to say no to self-enslavement and the enslavement of my kids. You're wearing a mask? No. You're going to close your business? No. Now, if one or two people do that, they can get picked off. 75 million people did it. It'd be unenforceable. And for me, this is the road that we need to go. We have the power. Can I just explain how a few control the many? It's real simple. If you imagine a pyramid, a hierarchical structure, and at the top of the pyramid, you've got the inner core of this cult, which is dictating the agenda for the world. And it imposes its will on the next level below, which acquiesces to that imposition and imposes it on the level below them. And very soon after you come down from that pyramid peak, you're meeting levels in the hierarchy who have no idea there is a cult. But the same process goes on all the way down the pyramid. Imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence. And then you get to the mass of the people at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, if we acquiesce to those levels of the hierarchy that are imposing upon us, that's governments and law enforcement and so on, then what we do as a mass of the people is we complete a circuit between the few at the top of the pyramid and the mass of humanity. And that circuit means that through imposition, acquiescence, that tiny few people at the core you could get into a single room have imposed their will on the entirety of the human population. It's what we saw in 2020 to present day. Now, okay, great, individuals come in and this politician says do this and I stand for this, okay. But what's going to change it is not them. It's the mass of people saying we are not completing the circuit. You want us to do this and you're telling us to do this because you want to enslave us. So therefore, we are not doing it. And if that happened, it's over. It's over. You imagine someone comes out of the White House or Capitol Hill or Downing Street and says, we've had a meeting, press conferences all the time now with this COVID nonsense. We've had a meeting and we've decided this is going to happen. What happens if the people say, we're not doing it? We ain't doing that. Where's the power? Wait, oh, no, please, you got to do it. I'm the government. No, we're not doing it. Not doing it. Well, we'll do this to you. We'll do it then. No, I'm not doing it. It's over. And it doesn't take an individual. Oh, great individuals come forward and make the contribution. But it doesn't take an individual to do it for us. We do it for ourselves. And a few cannot control the many unless the many are compliant to the few.
So, David, Sean, you mentioned a little bit earlier about myself being connected to a conscious community. That's actually not entirely true. I kind of gave up on that idea many years ago. But I am very much about, obviously, awakening consciousness planetarily. But I believe foundationally that what David is saying is correct, that it's got to do with a complete, absolute cessation of obedience to satanic and luciferic cult programming. It's got to be absolute. absolute disidentification with the Luciferic aspects of this hologram. And the bottom line for me is stop paying coin to Caesar. Caesar kills you. Caesar wants your babies dead. Stop offering your children up to Moloch, to Baphomet, which is exactly what's happening, especially when public health administration have run amok in the way that they have today. All you've got to do to recognize that government must now be brought into wholesale dissolution globally is to see what government has amounted to. It's amounted to a wholesale assault against the microbiome of every baby on the planet. That's extinction of species right there. Government has reached its zenith of witchery, of evil in that sense. David, do you agree that not paying taxes should be a clarion call for every conscious human being?
I would like to see it because, we give, I mean, if someone worked out, I'm sure someone must have done, how much of an income goes in taxation, not just income tax, but all the other taxes, it would be shocking. What this cult is doing is because it's vampire, it's vampiring human energy. You know, when Morpheus in the Matrix movie held up the battery and said the machines have turned humans into one of these, and then you saw the machines feeding off the energy of babies in that movie. That's what's happening, because this archontic force, because it is so distorted, does not have a energetic source that comes from balance and love and all these emotions and states of being. It's so distorted that it cannot make a connection to those frequencies, so it can't feed off that energy. That's why it wants no love in the world. That's why it wants to turn people against each other. That's why it wants all the conflict. It wants all the depression, all the suicide, all the anxiety, which of course has gone into overdrive because of this pandemic hoax. That's what it wants, because its distortion means that it operates on a very low band of frequency. And to feed, to be empowered, it has to feed off energy within that frequency band that it operates on. And that is basically low vibrational emotion, fear, depression, all these things. And like a war becomes a banquet, for instance. And so it's structured society, and it's manipulating events in society, not least in 2020 to now, to generate maximum amounts of this energy, which it uses to empower and feed itself. And so you will get, for instance, going into what you've just said, this is where human sacrifice comes from. This cult has been sacrificing humans, not least children, for as long as it's been in existence, back to Babylon and beyond. And when in ancient times they talked about sacrificing young virgins to the gods, well, the gods is this archontic force, and young virgins is code for children. And what happened is when humanity reached a level of maturity where it weren't having that anymore openly, these people went underground, and they've done it ever since. This is why I've uncovered in the book. So these famous people involved in satanic ritual and these horrors and the mind control operation and pedophilia that go with it. This is their energy. And why pedophilia? Well, first of all, why sacrifice and why pedophilia? The sacrifice part of it is that, again, if we appreciate that the gods they're actually sacrificing to are actually outside of our level of reality. It's why we can't see them. So in the rituals, they are bringing the sacrificed person to a state of utter terror.
Yep.
And what happens then, even on the level of the satanic ritual within our reality, is that at that level of terror creates an adrenaline in the blood, which is a nectar to these deeply sick people. And that when they drink the blood at the time of the sacrifice, that adrenaline is in the blood, and that gives them a high. But that terror that's building up through the sacrifice is being generated from the person as frequencies. And what's happening is these, at that level, take the form of entities outside of human sight, are absorbing this energy and feeding off it. That's the sacrifice to the god. And so if you then take that to humanity in general, we're looking at energetic vampires. They're feeding off low vibrational emotion all the time. And one of the expressions of the way they feed off humanity in our reality is money, which is what? It's an energy. And they've set up a money system that's basically sucking, vampiring the population dry. And if you think about it, what's freedom? Freedom is choice. The more choices you can make, the freer you are. The fewer choices, the less free you are. And in the society of the way it's structured today, money is a massive aid to making choices. So by controlling money, they're controlling choice of the population. And what they're doing now with this collapse of the economy, systematically, coldly, calculatedly done, is they're destroying human choice. And in doing so, they're destroying human freedom. The idea with this whole Great Reset is that they now control the money, they control the means that people need to survive in totality. That's the idea. Because the crucial part of this pandemic, or one major crucial part of this pandemic, there are others, but this is major, was to have the lockdowns purposely to destroy independent income and independent employment and livelihood. Because when that's gone, then people become dependent on the state. This is where the guaranteed income comes in, which will be a pittance. And if you don't do exactly what you're told, you don't get the guaranteed income. And by the way, how else are you going to survive? Because all the jobs have gone. This is so we're looking again at every level of a vampire force feeding off the energy and the essence of humanity. So in any way that we can stop that happening, is going to be an aid to unraveling this. And
so, David,
it has to stop.
Right. So money and attention.
Say again.
Money and attention. Our attention and our coin.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is the whole idea. I was going to say focus. That was appropriate. It's to focus attention all the time. And the more they can focus your attention, you lose peripheral vision. You lose peripheral vision, you lose the bigger picture, and you only see the dots. That's part of it. But the money side of it is controlling choice and thus controlling freedom. But I was just going to say, oh God, we have given power to this cult to create money that doesn't exist called credit and charges interest on it. It's insane the way that we've allowed this to happen. But how has it happened? Because again, the key foundation of everything, keep the people in ignorance of what they know. And thus you say to most people, how is money created? They'll say, well, governments do it, don't they? Or something. Yeah. When actually it's private banks making of credit. So the money situation is crucial because that's one of the foundation structures of human control, and never more so than now.
Right. And as I keep reminding people as well, David, money is a 3D totem of time and motion and life force. That's what it is. And it's all connected to attention, to photons, to how we project plasma into the field, and how we allow ourselves to become harvested resultantly by abnegating our sovereign expression in any way, shape, or form. It's an absolute no-no. A very important question here is coming in from Jessica from Arizona. Will you marry her, David?
Well, I haven't got the time. I'm sure I would love to, but I haven't got the time. I've lived alone here now since about 2006, and I just work, and never more so than now.
David, she's a very wealthy widow, David.
Oh, okay. Well, I might have to reconsider then.
Well, here's a real question. Why don't we do a documentary on this? I really think this would be an amazing documentary we could do about the biggest secret, essentially the energy feeding of the planet, right? On the different levels, you know, the blood, the energy, the attention, the money. You know, if people just we could do into something that would really blow people away in a concise.
This is his way of getting you on the record,
yes,
David.
Exactly.
So
I'm just putting it out there. I'm putting it out.
Yeah, well, look, I'm open to anything that gets this information circulating. It's my life. I get up in the morning, I do it. I go to bed, I wake up in the morning, I do it. Not because I'm a martyr. A, I find it fascinating, and B, it needs to be done. And I'm coming up 69 now, and you know, I'm going to be around for a long time yet. But you know, I want to give everything I can in the time I'm going to be in this world. And so I'll do anything that's effective in circulating this information. No problem at all.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Next question is
yours. We'll talk about that later, but I got you on the record now, at least to saying you're open to it.
So, David, if you had to spend an eternity on a remote planet in the Draco constellation with only one record album to listen to, which would it be?
Queen Greatest Hits.
You can't say Duran Duran. That wouldn't count.
Queen Greatest Hits. Yeah,
okay.
Freddie Mercury was a star. He was one of the great performers. I used to love watching him in the concerts with Queen.
He was remarkable. And you know, Brian May is the loveliest man in the world, but he supports the crown and all of that, the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I tell you what, it's been quite interesting to see the progression from like rock stars and you know, system challengers like the Rolling Stones and Mick Jagger, who end up taking honors off the Queen. I just find that absolutely bizarre.
It is bizarre.
But the thing with Freddie Mercury, I just thought he was an amazing performer, a real one-off, a real you know, they broke the mold. I love people like that. These unique people. But I was actually bought because I love Queen. I was bought a ticket by my sons and my daughter 2 Christmases ago to see Queen in their present form last year, and of course I didn't. And it's supposed to be this summer now, but it won't be either. So I'll probably never get to see them, really.
You'll see them virtually. They'll have virtual concerts going forth. It's all virtual reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not interested in virtual stuff. I've actually, I was a professional footballer, and you know, I've always, you know, liked watching football, but I've knocked all that on the head. Got rid of watching the football because when every time you turn a football match on and you see these professional players in an empty stadium. It just reminds me of the nonsense that's going on. So I'm done with football at the moment as well.
Yeah, it's not. You're right. It's knocked the guts out of it, hasn't it? Really has. So look, let's just quickly talk about Morgellons, if you don't mind. AI, transhumanism, and COVID-19. Morgellons, AI, transhumanism, COVID-19. To my mind, they're all the same goddamn thing. Can you speak on that, David?
Well, they're all connected, and it's funny, you know, people say that, you know, in terms of awareness and infinity, everything's connected. Well, yeah, it is, but it's not just out there. Everything down here is connected as well, and so you know, I've looked at this Morgellons situation over the years, talked to people who have suffered from it, and it's definitely some form of nanobot technology that has a form of life and is self-replicating, and that brings us to a number of things relating to COVID-19 and to the wider agenda, which kind of connect a lot of dots in the next few minutes. The plan, and it's part of this whole smart grid connecting the human mind to AI plan as well, is to transformed the nature of the human form from a biological state to a synthetic biological state, which is why synthetic biology is now exploding as a discipline of science.
Yep.
And the idea, I think one of the reasons for it, and there are many, many reasons, but one is that this smart grid to which the human mind is supposed to be connected with all the technology as well, to run it and to drive it is it's going to be necessary to generate phenomenal amounts of technologically generated radiation. I mean, when I look back, I was born in 1952. The technological radiation in our atmosphere, which we're interacting with then, compared with now, it's almost incomprehensible. And the human form as it is, I don't think is going to be able to cope with that. And I think they know that, and that's one reason they're moving into a different form that can cope with that level of radiation, because they're rolling out 5G now, but they're also already talking about 6G and 7G. So the radiation field is going to be absolutely transformed, which has implications for people connected to the greater consciousness as well. So you then look at the COVID-19 fake vaccine. It's nothing to do with some bloody virus. It's to do with changing the genetic nature of the body using synthetic material. So that's moving the body. And I said this right back in the summer. I said, they're not going to just have one COVID vaccine when it comes around. They're going to say you need them every year. Now, what are they saying? You need them every year. And this is the cumulative transformation to a synthetic biological state of the body. So then you look at the transgender arena. I have this saying: if it comes out of nowhere and is suddenly everywhere, it's the cult agenda. Someone's pressed a button on the next stage, and that's what happened with the whole transgender thing. And what I would say to transgender people is, this is not about you. You may think it's about you, and they'll tell you it's about you, but it's not about you at all. You are not the end of this. You are the means to that end. For this reason. Huxley talked about in Brave New World in the 1930s about this world of where parents would replace by a no procreating human, where technologically children would be, in his word, decanted in world state hatcheries. Now, this new human, I'll call it human 2.0, is not meant to procreate, and thus it does not need gender of any kind. It's non-procreating human. And so you start then to see why suddenly we've had this gathering war on men, the toxic masculinity, war on men, which is the efforts to divide men from women, divide and rule. And now you just had this executive order from Biden about people in male bodies who say they identify as women can take part in women's sport. That's the end of women's sport. There are 300 nearly high school boys in America who can sprint faster than the fastest woman sprinter in the world. So that's the end of women's sport. And I did say, when this masculine attack on men was coming, was starting, I said they're gonna move to women eventually, because men and women are no longer necessary for the human 2.0 they want to go to in terms of procreation. And so what's happening with the transgender, which is why I say it's not the end, it's the means to an end, is that they are starting to fuse the genders. So they're now targeting young kids at the youngest age. It's disgusting beyond words, and young people in general, to question their gender and redefine their gender. Tell them there's 100 genders. There aren't. And so the idea is you confuse gender, and you confuse gender, especially in the young, because they will be the adults when they want this really start this to come in. You confuse gender and confuse gender on the road to fusing gender. And that doesn't mean a transgender. That's just the stepping stone, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's appropriate, ladies and gentlemen, I suppose. You're a stepping stone to that. The idea is the no gender human. And in many ways, you know, again, how appropriate it is that it's this woke mentality that's pushing this transgender, and it is tyranny because it's overriding the rights of other people in terms of men and women, not least, you know, women having the right not to have a male body going into their toilets and their locker room. And it's being done not for transgender people, but to advance this agenda to the no gender human, the human 2.0. And so yes, all these things connect, absolutely.
Isn't it more of a gray alien almost? I feel like they're creating the gray aliens amongst these humans that, as you say, are, you know, they're transgender, they're neutered, they're basically microchipped, brain, you know, mind controlled. It's sort of a gray future.
Yeah, and I do think I've written this in the books that these so-called gray aliens are a form of AI cyborg. And in many ways, a blueprint of where they want to take humanity. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. And just to follow on that, wouldn't you say that if we look at the hierarchy of the cabal, right, we've talked about the archonic structure or the archonic energy, which might be an AI energy or force, but are the Dracos still really in power in your worldview and in terms of how the cabal is orchestrated, or do you not get into the sort of galactic hierarchy of this?
Well, I used to, but I'm focusing on these other things now. But that's not to say that I'm saying, okay, I'll forget about all that. No, it was just a level I focused on a lot, and now I'm focusing on other levels. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing with the reptilian side of things is very, very interesting. I didn't go looking for it. What happened is that I had a phenomenal experience in the early 1990s. And was told by a psychic that I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets, and I would be world famous. And I'd face enormous opposition, but quote, they would always be there to protect me. And it seemed very strange because at the time I was a sports presenter with the BBC. From the moment I left her home, my life started to become a synchronistic journey of information coming to me in many and various ways. And one of the things I was told that time with the psychic, a lady called Betty Shine, was that I would be led to knowledge from this point, and at other times knowledge would be put into my mind. And there used to be an advert on British television which had the punchline, it does exactly what it says on the tin. Well, it did exactly what it said on the tin because my life became that. I would have just insights out of nowhere, and at other times information would come to me in many and various ways, so it took me on this journey. And what would happen is that a subject would come into my life, and suddenly information on that subject would come from all angles. And it was about 1996, 97, probably more like 97. I went to America and I was traveling around America, talking to nobody, but trying to. And I was in a different place every night. But over a period of 15 days, I met 12 different people in different cities who told me the story that they'd experienced of seeing someone appearing human change into a non-human reptilian form and then change back again. And, you know, the way I work is I don't listen to that and say, oh, this is what's going on then. Put it on the back burner and I'll see if other information comes to support it. Well, it did in large amounts. And there's no question that for me, after all these years, that there is a reptilian force. Now, I talked to Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman who's died recently in his 90s. And he was coming from the Zulu lore legend point of view. He was a carrier of this knowledge. And he was the one that told me about what the Zulus call the Chitahuri, which is a reptilian race manipulating human society. And he said to me, interestingly, he said, "You want to understand the Illuminati, study the reptile." And I did. And I remember being in a crocodile farm in Australia. Went there a couple of times, and I watched displays where the guy in the pen with them was saying, "When I do this, the crocodile will do that." And every time the crocodile did exactly what he said in response to what he did. And basically, what Credo was talking about and what I saw was the almost computer software like responses where you press enter and they do this, you press enter and they do that. And you know, I think that this whole reptilian phenomenon is a wonderful example and expression in form of this archontic consciousness. It's very, very computer-like and very unemotional. I mean, when you look at Bill Gates, you know, apart from the odd little smile, where's the emotion? These people have no emotion. Look at, you know, all these people. It's very computer-like. And I do think we are talking of a very advanced version of AI. Yes. In not only these bloodlines, but also in many of these non-human forms as well, not least the greys, and I think to a considerable extent these reptilians. And you know, and I've talked to people who've been in the underground bases, like the China Lake Naval's weapons station in the Mojave Desert in California. I've driven around that 2 or 3 times. There's nothing to see above the ground. Actually, it's all underground. And I've talked to people because the main gate of the China Lake Naval Weapons Center is a place called Ridgecrest. Well, that's like well, I mean, this is for our older viewers. That's like Peyton Place. I mean, you know, it's or Stepford Wives. That area. There's so many mind control people there. Because that's all part of how they keep information compartmentalized, is they're using mind control people all the time. And I've talked to people who've from Ridgecrest who've told me that they've been in the underground bases as part of their mind control, and how there's reptilians under there and how they interact with humans, which is what I'm talking about with this technological transfer. But also how they, and this has come from other people who've interacted with reptilian entities, how absolutely unemotional they are. Greys too, absolutely unemotional. And I do think they're a form of software, because when you want to impose something, and this is very interesting too about the psychology of this cult, therefore the archontic psychology, is that they are incredibly ill at ease with states of flux, with situations that they can't know or completely control the outcome. So the ideal to this consciousness of this cult is if you had a football match, you don't just control one side, therefore you influence the result, but you control both sides and the referee, so you know what the score is going to be before the first ball is kicked. They're comfortable with that. States of flux, they really don't like. Humans can kind of cope with that, but they can't. So this is why they're trying to control everything all the time, and why they use mind control people, why they use AI entities, is because they can eliminate as much as possible the chance that things will happen as in a way that they can't call. This is, of course, a massive expression of phenomenal levels of insecurity. And I think that this force is deeply insecure because it's dependent on humanity.
Very good. I think that's so important, that aspect. And because a number of people are asking a simple question of you is, you know, Are we winning or are we losing? Simply put. And what you've just said for me is very, very loaded. And that the insecurity we're seeing, the kind of vacillation in the ethers of the old draconian status quo being so fucking all powerful that we couldn't even see it, right? Now we see it. Now we have the texture against which we can define our own light, that sovereignty and that upswelling. So would you agree that we're on the winning side to be incredibly reductive about it?
Well, I wouldn't like to be one of them, that's for sure, because they are completely dependent. And this is where so much of the insecurity comes from. They're completely dependent on controlling the perceptions of humanity. They have to. If they don't, the game's over. And I'll tell you what I was told. I mentioned, I went to see this psychic. And the reason I went to see the psychic in 1990 is from the summer or early spring, really, of 1989, when I was a national spokesman for the Green Party in Britain and a presenter with the BBC. Suddenly, I felt that if I was in a room alone, I wasn't alone. There was something there. And I went all the way through 1989 into the spring of 1990 when I saw the psychic. And it got more and more and more tangible. That's why I went to see the psychic. I didn't tell her anything. I thought, well, I'll go and see her and see if she can pick up what the hell's going on around me. And one of the things that came out in that early period, with the psychic, and there was like 2 others at that time as well, is something that actually led to the title of the first book I wrote after this awakening for me happened, called Truth Vibrations. I called it Truth Vibrations because what I was told through these psychics, and it was a common theme through about 2 or 3 of them at the time, is that there was a vibrational change coming, which kind of locks into what you're talking about, Sasha. A vibrational change was coming that was going to act like a spiritual alarm clock, and it was going to wake people up from their coma. And the ones that were more awake were going to be affected first. And then eventually those that at that time were solid gold asleep, this is 1990, were going to be affected. And they were going to awaken to an understanding that that life was not like they thought it was, in effect. Right. And that it was going to have that effect. It was like a vibrational unraveling of the density, we would call it today. Yeah. But it also said something else. This is 1990. That this is why I coined the term for it, truth vibrations. It said that what's going to happen is that this vibrational infusion is going to bring to the surface all that's been hidden. All that we hadn't seen before is going to bring to the surface. Now, in 1990, there was no evidence of that. None. And for a few years after. But now look at it. Look at what's been brought to the surface that was previously hidden that we now know. Just phenomenal things that we never knew before. And more coming out all the time. And so I do think that, and we need to appreciate this. This is not just people in human bodies trying to turn this around. This is a massive energetic transformation, multi-level, multi-dimensional is going on. And we are grounding it in this reality, but we are absolutely not alone. And there are forces at work that would make the cult look like Mary Poppins in terms of power. So I'm very, very optimistic because, you know, there was that song in the 60s, which went, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And I think this is so important.
Janis Joplin.
Yeah. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Well, what happens psychologically is when you think you've got something to lose, you will conform and you will do what you're told and you do whatever you think you have to do to not lose it.
Yes, indeed.
What's happening is people are losing so much, in many cases, everything, as a result of what's going on systematically. And there is a shift in the human psyche when you think, well, I've got nothing left to lose. how could it be any worse if I
Yeah.
absolutely stand my ground? And, you know, I've used this analogy of people trapped or being chased by an army. And while there's a place to run, they'll run and they'll keep running. But they get trapped in a ravine and the army's coming, and where the army's coming from is the only way out. Well, what do we do, chaps? Nowhere to run. Nothing left to lose. Let's give it a go.
Very good.
Let's stand up because we've nothing left to lose and there's nowhere to run. And,
Right.
and you know, vast numbers of people are going into that situation now because of this COVID hoax. And I think we're going to see a very different humanity emerging the more and more that happens. And the more and more people become aware that this is not a random event. This has been carefully calculated over a very long period of time.
Indeed. Well, David, that's beautifully stated. And kids out there, the song David's referring to is, of course, Bobby McGee. Sean, we're coming to a close. Before we sign off, I wanted you just to give your reflections in 2 minutes or less on this conversation we've had with David.
It's far-reaching. I mean, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think it gives a great insight for people into what we're up against, but at the same time that we are coming into our own in this time period, this great awakening of humanity. I mean, David, you've been at the forefront of it for decades, and Sasha as well, you know, both in research and experience and understanding it. So I think it sums it up when you say the I am, you know, recognizing the I am. This is where my own interests have led me in the last few years. Especially, I did a documentary with Deepak Chopra called Metahuman, which was all about this, you know, how our perceptions are really just, it's our consciousness. Our reality is our consciousness, our experience of consciousness. This is a great exploration of consciousness in a reality that's full of duality at the moment, and extreme dualities. But I believe through that duality, we're actually going to come to a greater coherence and a greater recognition of our unity and our oneness, which is to say, not the oneness of the hive, but the oneness of being able to be both an individual, one and the many, right? Being individual and connected to God's source, being in a greater attunement to our true selves, which is the glorious reflection of creation, and that beauty and love is the root of it. And no matter how the service to self, archonic force, I feel I've known them in many lives, and I called some of them friends in lifetimes. But at the end of the day, their service to self is like a black hole that will ultimately destroy itself. They cannot feed indefinitely without ultimately being checked out of God's universe. So that path of service to self leads nowhere. And we are now entering this awareness of service to others, really, which is also service to self, because we are all each other. We are reflections, you know, again, of the one. So if we serve others, we serve God, we are ultimately serving ourselves, our destiny, our higher selves. So I think we are in a great space here.
Beautiful.
Well, if I could just say this, because you make a very, very important point there about the individual and the whole. There's this idea that you are an individual, or you're all that is. Well, you are a point of attention within all it is. That's what we call the individual, and it's a unique point of attention. But at the same time, it's an expression of all that is, has been, and ever can be. So to celebrate your uniqueness as an, quote, individual is actually to celebrate the fact that you're part of a whole. Because what is the whole? What is all that is, has been, and ever can be? How can that be brought together in one phrase? It's all possibility. We are an expression of all possibility. And with all possibility, all is possible. Thus, we celebrate uniqueness, the uniqueness of ourselves, because that's an expression celebrating all possibility. And what happens is when you open your consciousness to the greater self, you don't become a blob of the greater self. You become even more a unique expression of this vast, infinite, eternal all possibility. That's who we are. And it's people in that state of awareness are not going to be intimidated by a bloke in a in a uniform or a bloke in a dark suit. They're not.
It's the chap in the white coat that we're worried about. It's the one lunging at us with a vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, they can stick their vaccine where they're sticking their anal swab. That's what I say.
Very good. So, David, just in closing, I was thinking about Credo Mutwa, and I know how important that blessed man was to you. But his story for me was very important when I learned about it through you, and he was abducted, if you remember, into the underground at the Metopus Hills, which is where I grew up effectively in Rhodesia at that time. And it was a very strange place, the Metopus Hills. I went there very often as a kid. I mean, that was, my life is embedded with the coding there. The curious thing is that Cecil John Rhodes' his enshrine and his grave is there actually in the hills. And, there's a certain geometry to the fact that Cecil John Rhodes, that proxy of the imperial hegemony of the draconian British crown, who cleaved a path all the way through the Dark Mother, through Africa, in search of golden diamonds and blood sports, ends up being at the same point that an underground military base, abducted Credo Mutwa, hurling him into his shamanic prerogative in life, which had a tremendous impact on you. And I think through Credo, he really helped to focus the African spirit into you, which I've always recognized in you, incidentally. And I just think that there's beautiful geometry to all of it. And there's beautiful geometry to having this conversation with you today. And I couldn't be happier. And I thank you for all your service and love you very, very deeply. Thank you, David Icke.
Well, that's very, very kind, Sasha and Sean. And it's been a delight. And we just need to keep on keeping on, because we're going to get somewhere, that's for sure.
Quite so. And to the 7,500 people who've stayed with us for 2 hours and 3 minutes, I try to keep it on the hour, but you got 3 minutes more than you bargained for. Thank you so much for staying with us. Sorry we couldn't get to all of these questions, but yes, we will absolutely be throwing a drag net over the Ike to get him back on our screen as soon as he can make it. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sean. Much love to you all, and thank you all.
Thank you.